Mr. Speaker, my colleagues, every year we come to this chamber in April and pass this resolution to proclaim April as Organ and Tissue Donor Awareness Month. And it's been a privilege to work with Assemblyman Ortiz over the past several years on this issue. Prior to that, Jim Conti, prior to 2013, our former colleague Jim Conti from 1992 to 2012 was one of the main advocates and prime sponsors on this resolution. I know Mr. Conti's family was here recently in Albany visiting, and you heard a lot of wonderful remarks about Mr. Conti. And for many of our newer members who didn't have the privilege to know Jim Conti, Jim was a two-time kidney transplant recipient and a great human being. And he was a staunch and tireless advocate on the issue of organ donation. We lost Jim in October of 2012. And although his passing left a hole in the heart of this chamber, his mission and his work still lives on in each and every one of us to help bring more organ donor awareness to the people of this state. And it's really incumbent upon each and every one of us to carry on this mission and message, because it literally saves lives. When Jim talked about this issue, he always talked about with passion and the facts, and just go over some of the facts, because the facts are important. First and foremost, medical technology is changing each and every day to help with the advancement, which is going to save more lives. But unfortunately, the waiting list continues to grow, especially here in New York. And what I would say to you, I know a number of our family members, people have been touched by personal stories. If you haven't, the only thing I can say is you never know when one of your loved ones might be in need of an organ transplant. So please keep that in mind as we move forward. But some of the facts in New York that jump out at me is that we have over 10,000 New Yorkers right now on a waiting list waiting for an organ transplant. 1,700 have been waiting for more than 5 years. There are 52 registries across our country. New York is number 51. 51 out of 52 registries. Mr. Speaker, my colleagues, that's just unacceptable. New York has the third highest need for organ donor recipients, but yet the second worst registry. New York's list makes up 10% of the national list. The national list is over 113,000 people. Some other staggering statistics that you should know about: the national average is 50%. The number of registered eligible people who could donate an organ is 50%. The state of Montana is number one at 89%. The state of New York, 26%. Mr. Speaker, my colleagues, that's unacceptable. Over 50% of those on the waiting list are minorities. In 2015, we lost 500 men, women, and children in New York waiting for an organ transplant. That's one person, one New Yorker every 15 hours. One person who signs up to be an organ donor at the time of their death, they can save up to 8 lives and impact the sight and vision and mobility of up to 50 others. Think about that statistic. One person at the time of their death can save up to 8 lives and affect up to 50 others. And we all have some personal stories. I know Mr. Ortiz spoke about a couple of our colleagues. Some former colleagues who are no longer serving here. Assemblyman Bill Hoyt. He died on this floor waiting for a heart transplant, and no one knew it to that day. And his son, former Assemblyman Sam Hoyt, continued work on that issue in his years in his chamber. Our former Assemblyman Richard Brodsky's daughter, Willie, received a kidney from his wife, and he's still a great proponent of organ donation. Our colleague Andy Goodell, his daughter, selflessly donated a kidney to a friend. And for me, Mr. Speaker, this story has always been very personal. My sister was a 2-time organ transplant recipient, first in 2000 from the kindness of a stranger, where she received a kidney pancreas transplant because her body was affected by juvenile diabetes. And then in 2006, I had the privilege to donate a kidney to my sister. And I saw firsthand how organ donation can impact a family and their life and their quality of life. And I never really talked about that issue until I talked to Jim Conti. He says, you have to talk about this story. We have to bring awareness to this issue. We've taken a lot of positive steps over the past few years. First with the passage of Lawrence Law, which Assemblyman Ortiz talked about how now when you do your driver's license, you have to answer whether you want to be an organ donor or not. In 2014, we passed legislation for a public-private partnership. Last year, we passed an amendment to Lauren's Law, and since that amendment went into effect, organ donation registrations have increased 70% at the DMV. People answering, yes, I want to be an organ donor. And even in this year's budget, we have appropriated $1 million to help with the issue of organ donation and tissue awareness. But you know what? We can do more. We can do better. We have to improve this registry. You might be asking, what can I do? Well, 1, register to be an organ donor yourself. 2, use your office to promote organ donation and awareness. Use social media, Facebook, Twitter. Post links on your Facebook page. Send notices to the media. Earlier today, Assemblyman Ortiz and I circulated memos to each and every one of your offices with press packets, social media information, bracelets, flags, pins, things that we can continue to talk about. Because there's so much more we can do to change the numbers. You know, Mr. Speaker, my colleagues, we passed a lot of bills in this House. Some are good, some are not so good. But this issue is not necessarily about money or legislation. It's about promoting awareness. And this is something that actually saves lives. But it does require a commitment on our part to take action. So we're asking each and every one of you, use your offices, use your bully pulpit, use your media to talk about this issue. Because, as I said before, you know, when you have a personal connection to this, it affects you. But right now, you don't know if one of your loved ones is ever going to need a life-saving transplant, organ transplant. And if you do, you don't want to be in New York State being numbered the 51 out of 52 registries or 10,000 New Yorkers on the waiting list. We can do better. And I'd be remiss if I didn't go back to our former colleague, Jim Conti. You know, as an individual, no one did more for this issue as an individual than Jim Conti did. But collectively as a body, we can do so much more to bring awareness and education into our communities across the state. And that's what Jim would want us to do. That's what our loved ones would want us to do. So let's just not just pass this resolution and go on to the next thing. Let's think of how we can go back into our communities and promote awareness and education, look at new ideas and legislation, and getting that awareness and education out there, because this is about saving lives. So, Mr. Speaker, my colleagues, thank you for allowing me to speak on this important resolution. It's so important, and I thank all of you for your attention and your action, and I will be voting in the affirmative. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, sir.